The following review contains spoilers for the Coma recut, so if you don't wish to be spoiled, you may skip to the opinion section at the timestamp below. 3 weeks have passed since the events of the Coma recut. Youngjun is comatose and has been hospitalized for some unknown reason despite seemingly leaving the coma in the first game. You play as Mina Park, who is his friend and neighbor, has frequently visited him in the hopes of waking up. She also holds the last thing that was in Youngjun's hand before he fell into a coma, and that is an amulet with an old picture of some unknown woman on the inside. On the night of the super blood moon, Mina wanders the halls of her school after a late night class session and notices Seiho doing something strange. She follows him inside a classroom and eventually passes out as the moon starts to appear in full. Once she awakens, she finds herself in an alternate space resembling her school, but has gotten a nightmarish makeover with tentacles constraining areas, corpses and spirits haunting the area, and no sign of light to be seen. However, she's not alone, as an entity patrols these haunted halls, killing any unwanted guests roaming about. This entity is known as Dark Song, whom you may remember from the previous game, who also pursued Youngjun when he wandered these halls. She is also accompanied by the main threat of this game, a shade known as Vicious Sister, who plans on using the power of the super blood moon to enter the real world. It will be up to Mina to uncover what is going on and escape this new nightmare she is in. Unlike the first game, you will have multiple environments to explore outside of just the school. You will also explore a police office, a marketplace, a hospital, and other places. You will also interact with an assortment of NPCs which populate these areas, which include returning characters from the previous game. In addition to the exploration mechanics from the first game, you will also have new areas to hide in and a new way to avoid detection by your pursuer. There are also puzzles and quests to fulfill so that Mina will have a better chance of survival against the looming threat. With updated visuals and gameplay mechanics, is the Coma 2 Vicious Sisters a worthy follow-up to the first game, or should it have dropped out of school? Let's see what works in the Coma 2 Vicious Sisters in The Good. The Coma 2 got a complete visual overhaul with sharper looking environments and better character models, and you can feel the improvements instantly. The first game had a very rough look to it, which was not bad in itself, but the sequel has a much smoother look to it, with tween animations both in-game and during dialogue segments which utilize tweening animations similar to live 2D. There is also voice acting in the game which was not present in the first game. Do know though that the voice acting is exclusively Korean, so you will need to still read subtitles, though the voice acting is limited to cutscenes in specific dialogue portions. Speaking of the cutscenes, there are a lot more of them in this game and they feel more dynamic, emulating the style of a comic book further, complete with its art style and comic style panels. Complementing this are the new environments you will be exploring which go beyond the school grounds to the surrounding areas around Seoul. These areas have their own NPCs to interact with, as well as notes to uncover to see what the residents talked about, which add to the lore of that specific area. Some residents will talk about construction plans interfering with some of their businesses, while other notes may make references to the Korean War. I like how you also find special notes left by important characters that give backstory on things like the coma itself, the purpose of shamankas, and creatures you encounter in the coma. It was also interesting learning about the DoktorPebbles, which was incorporated into one chapter of the story. Speaking of the story, I love the characters that you meet in the game and the amount of development they get. You get to encounter and learn more about the ghost vigilantes, and you get nice development out of the main character Mina as the game progresses. Nothing against Young-ho, but it really felt like he was a bit along for the ride and did not get much development. Meanwhile, Mina interacts with multiple characters and feels like a completely different person by the final chapter compared to the first one. Another improvement comes from the game's sound design, which helps give each area you explore an identity of its own. The school utilizes ambient noises with sounds of doors sliding open and closed, while the hospital has a lot of beeping noises in the operating rooms and other sounds. Even better is that the sound of the hunting shade's footsteps are much more audible than the first game. The first game had very subtle footstep sounds which got a bit misleading at times. In the Coma 2, the footsteps can be heard more clearly and really necessitates the use of headphones to accurately track their position. The tutorials in the first game only used illustrations, which led to a bit of confusion to some of the mechanics present, but this game takes the time to properly explain them. Now there is no longer confusion on how some of the old and new mechanics work, and boy, there are some big additions that change how you explore environments. In addition to all the exploration mechanics from the first game, now you have a new way of hiding which involves QuickTime button prompts. I like how there are more places to hide, and depending on which area you hide in, the number of buttons you have to press changes, with the riskiest spots having the most at 3. It really adds to the tension where screwing up means that the shade will find you and you have to find somewhere else to hide. The game really encourages exploration this time, since there are key items you need to craft before the end of one of the chapters, and you will need to locate the noteman that inhabits the area for clues on what you need to find to craft it. You don't have to craft the item, but the end cutscene for the chapter will be different, and without the key item, Mina will sustain permanent health loss for the rest of your playthrough. Thankfully, this does not lock you out of the endings, but it does make your playthrough a bit harder, so you will need to be extra cautious if you decide to go that route. I actually enjoyed exploring the environments for these items and other collectibles, and it helps that fulfilling these tasks is a lot less tedious than the first game, since everything you need to find in a chapter is relegated to one area. No more having to backtrack through different environments to find the items you need to complete the task, but you will be able to backtrack to previous areas quicker later on in the game. You will also find key items used to access areas you couldn't reach before, which makes backtracking more valuable and more convenient than before. Another thing I really like is that the map now updates with things you find in the environment like save rooms, vending machines, and the workbench. Now you can keep track of key areas better and plan out your route in case you need to purchase an item or find the nearest save station. One last thing I want to bring up is how the game has overhauled the item use in the game and how the game pauses. In the previous game, you could only access items from your backpack, and the game didn't pause when you opened your bag, which led to frustrating moments where you're killed for trying to reach into your bag quickly for the item that replenishes your stamina. Thankfully, this game fixes that issue by having an item quick select menu on the bottom right. Now you no longer need to rummage through your bag for the item you need and can just use the analog stick to navigate to it in real time and use the shoulder button to use it. However, let's say in the heat of the moment you cannot possibly select the correct item in time. Not a problem, because in addition to this, the game properly pauses when you open your inventory menu, so now you can take a breather and select the item you need. This game brings many improvements and does a lot right, but it is by no means perfect, so we'll be marking off this assignment in the bad. I mentioned before how the map updates with key areas you visit. Even though this is true, it does not mark off inaccessible doors that require a key item to open. This would have made exploration more helpful so you can keep track of areas to revisit once you have the item you need. Another issue I have with the game is the item crafting you do in each chapter. I mentioned how I like the implementation of QuickTime events while hiding since it adds to the tension. This mechanic, however, has no place during the item crafting segment since there's no tension, and if you fail to craft it, you can just start over the process again on the spot. Another annoying factor in this game are the shade appearances, which feel like they operate on RNG. Sometimes they can appear at stairways you reach and not give you enough time to dodge or attack, though it becomes worse at the end of the second chapter onwards, where you have to deal with Dark Song, who can one-hit kill you unless you have mace in your inventory. You are only able to carry one at a time, but considering how hard it is to predict her appearances at times, it is a worthy investment. One last nitpick I have is that some of the NPC animations look a bit rough, though I only really noticed this at the beginning of the game before everything kicks off proper. Now with all that out of the way, let's give this game its final grade in the opinion. The Coma 2 Vicious Sisters is not only a worthy follow-up to the first game, it is also a massive improvement over the first game in every way. The visuals and sound design give it an overall better presentation, but the quality of life changes made to the gameplay really help it stand out. Players will experience many thrills and chills as they get into the game that will make it hard to put down. Do note that you will want to have played the first game before this one, since certain characters and concepts get introduced proper in that game, but even in its rough state, it's still enjoyable in its own right. If you're a fan of Asian-inspired horror games, then I definitely recommend the Coma 2, as it is a fun ride through and through with its survival mechanics, story, and character development. And now it's time for this game's final grade. I would give the Coma 2 Vicious Sisters the classic game Snake on the Nokia cell phone out of 10. Thanks for watching, and tune in for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, please check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.